I mean, they had beds. They had neon lights around the beds, posters, signs, sports teams, a rug. It was a fully functioning 2-bedroom apartment in the basement of this rental. I'm like, how did we not know? How on earth did we not know that somebody's living a full life in this basement?
Welcome back to the Talk Midland podcast. My name is Logan Richetti with Modern Realty. Today I have my pal, Bethany Law, 6024 Property Management in Midland.
Yes, sir.
All right, so a couple of years ago you said, I want to do more. And I said, are you sure? And you said, I want to be the premier property management company in Midland.
Yeah.
And I said, are you sure? Because that's a tough gig. And you said, yeah, I want to do it. And so here we are a couple of years later, and you are the premier property manager in the city of Midland. You have your own building, your own business, your own staff, your own payroll, your own book of business, and you're growing.
Yeah.
But let's talk about it because it's been a long journey.
It's been long. I should have listened to you in the first place. No, it's been good. It's been good. It's a learning experience. We have an amazing team of people working for us now. Spent the last 2 years working on standard operating procedures and efficiencies and getting to the point where we're not making any mistakes. And I think we're finally getting our footing under us.
Well, when we met, you were coming off of a role as a leader in a nonprofit organization, right? Mm-hmm. What was that?
I've been with quite a few of them, but I'm the founder of the Northern Michigan Alliance for Children. So it's a nonprofit based out of Harrison, Michigan that provides, for the most part, forensic interview, victim advocacy, services to children who are victims of abuse. So I worked in that field for about 14 years. Built amazing teams, in Clare, worked in Midland, worked in Isabella County, started a center up in the Upper Peninsula, got them up and running, and then kind of handed the reins over to some great people who run it now.
Yeah, and then you got your real estate license to start selling real estate, and that you did that for a while, and you still do.
Yep.
But there was a certain point at which you said, hey, I want to be a leader, and I want to get back into that role, which I think is your natural role anyway. And so you decided after a lot of different, looking at a lot of different opportunities to move into property management. Mm-hmm. This is basically residential and commercial properties in and around the Midland area.
Correct.
So how long has it been open?
We took over Modern Realty's property management division in August of 2023. So coming up on 3 years.
Yeah.
Just hit 3 years.
Property management had never been a big priority for our company, but we always had some infrastructure so we could manage rentals. A lot of those happened to be mine and some other clients that we had and other agents that had rentals. But it was never, frankly, we never cracked the code. It's a very difficult business to build because it requires so many different moving parts. And so when you took over and decided to spearhead that and build your own brand and do your own thing, I was excited because property management in Midland is not very well done by and large, in my opinion. Anywhere it's hard to be done well for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into here. But you bought a building.
Yeah.
What's the address of the building?
Somebody found that building for me.
You had a good agent on that one.
You did good. 712 Cambridge. So we look like we're attached to Village Green, but we're actually the building right behind it.
Yeah. And that was a really interesting opportunity. It was an off-market commercial space, an office building that I happen to know that was coming on the market. I connected you with the owner, and you guys hammered out a great deal. Awesome guy. I want to get him on the show, and his name's Dean. He's done some beautiful renovations of commercial spaces in Midland. He was responsible for the Rise building when Rise bought that building from him. And so he, as you know, because you live in this space now, he has done some beautiful renovations to commercial spaces in and around Midland. You had the opportunity to buy this building to put your business in it.
Yeah.
You took the opportunity, but then you have made some pretty extensive repairs and improvements to that building as well to make it your own. That building, like you said, it backs up to Village Green. You access it from Cambridge. You can see it from the Saginaw corridor, but to get to that building, you go through the back. And let's talk about the journey of building the company.
Yeah.
One of the first things I remember you doing was you had to look at the property management software. And I'm interested in small business construction, as you know. I love this avenue, and so do you. But there was a lot. There was a lot to handle. I remember when Finley was born, or was being born, or was new, I was building infrastructure for property management, as you know, because you've rebuilt the whole thing better. But there's a lot that goes on. You have to start with the software because your tenants need to pay rent and your owners need to have distributions, and there needs to be an accounting platform to handle all that. But also there's all kinds of other elements that go into it, like turnovers and lease ups and, late fees and all the different elements of that. But when you started and you built the vision for the company, what was the first thing that you attacked? Do you remember?
The first thing I did was basically a deep dive into what you already had, what was working, what wasn't working, interviewing owners, investors on what was working, what wasn't, what they needed, talking to the tenants, making sure everything was standardized and working well. And then from there, we were able to look at opportunities and where we could grow or where we could change. I think the problem with property management as a whole is a lot of people start out because they have their own rentals, right? Somebody moves out of their house, buys a new house, gets married, they have a second building, they're like, let's rent it out. So they start managing their own rental. Then maybe they pick up one or two more, they're doing 2 or 3 rentals at the same time, it's manageable, it's fine. And then they say, oh, I can take it on for other people, for other friends, other family. And as you scale, those simple procedures that you have in the beginning, they don't work anymore because you can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
Right? I won't allow my staff to go over about 75 properties per employee because it is a lot to manage. And that's with systems in place, right? So the first thing we did was look at the software that you had. I wanted one that was a little more scaled towards larger enterprise because I wanted to grow quickly. So we ended up switching software to a new company, and that was a time-consuming process and very challenging for us and our owners.
Yeah. It's anytime you transfer software of a business from one operating platform to another one, there's going to be a transition period. It's going to be a pain in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be disruption in your day-to-day processes. Your clients are not going to like it. Your owner's not going to like it. But I think you make a good point. A lot of property management opportunities and businesses start, like you just said, you're handling your own stuff, and then you take on friends and family, and next thing you know, it's different. It's a different business model when you're serving a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen tenants, and then also the landlords and the owners that are associated with those properties.
Right.
The other type of landlord, if you will, is like you described a little bit, where somebody has a house, they move out of their house to buy a new house, their families get together, they get divorced, whatever, they move out of town, they relocate, and they have one house. Mm-hmm. And instead of selling it for whatever reason, maybe the equity position isn't good, or they want to hang on to it, or they want to come back to it, whatever, they, instead of selling it, they try to rent it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to handle a rental evolution, it's very difficult because you just don't know how to deal with it. That's where property management comes into play, and it becomes very valuable if you have 1 or 2 of your own properties and you don't want to deal with the hassle of finding tenants, negotiating leases, preparing move-in checklists, all the different collecting rents, obviously, all the different things that go along with handling a rental property, right?
Yeah.
So how do you fit in? How do you solve that problem now for existing homeowners in, say, Midland and the surrounding areas that maybe have one rental property, or they're about to have one, or they're thinking about buying one, but they don't want to necessarily be involved in the front-facing communications with tenants?
A lot of the owners that we have coming to us are exactly those people who have been doing it, and then they hit a hiccup or they hit a problem, or they're going through the eviction process and they're like, they're not listening to me, they're not following my orders, what do I do next, right? And like you said, if you don't do it regularly, you either forget, or you don't know how to do it, or you don't know the intricacies of state law of fair housing. We get that all the time where people don't actually know the fair housing laws. So yes, there is a cost to hiring a property manager, but you save so much in the long run when, because of our knowledge and our experience and our efficiencies, we can minimize vacancy times. We can maximize your rents. We know the market really well. We can leverage our resources to bring in tenants, again, to minimize those vacancies. And then to make the eviction process efficient and seamless, so you aren't losing time, as you're waiting for that to move forward.
Yeah. And I think one of the main benefits of actually hiring a property manager is that you can remove yourself from the communication. Mm-hmm. And, the truth of the matter is, unless you're a professional real estate owner, investor, landlord, if you will, you don't necessarily want to be bothered with day-to-day interactions with your tenant. And it's not that you don't like the tenant or anything. It's just you want to have a buffer. Yeah. And the main value, in my opinion, other than everything you just described, to having a property management company represent you as a landlord, as an owner, is that you can remove yourself from the correspondence, from the communication. Your tenant doesn't need to have your cell phone. They don't need to know where you live. They don't need to know what your name is. Mm-hmm. They don't need to ask you for special favors or concessions or any of that stuff. Your property manager acts as a conduit, not necessarily a conduit, but but an actual representative on your behalf. And we talk about this all the time, but then you got, you have the other side of the coin is if you're a tenant, if you're renting a property, whether it be an apartment or a house, your property manager, your landlord, your property manager, if you will, can have a big impact on the experience that you have as a tenant. I know I'm talking about things like work orders, problems, neighbor complaints, when things break or whatever, or if you're having trouble paying your rent for that month or whatever, there's a lot of interaction that you have with the property manager. So how does 6024 property management create the best possible experience for your tenants that you serve?
It's so hard to balance, right? Because we are serving so many different groups with very different needs and desires. So it is extremely hard to balance our relationships with the investors as well as with the tenants. Our new slogan recently has been your house, their home, our problem, right?
I like that.
Because tenants, they will pull on your heartstrings. These people, especially in the lower income housing, these people have hard lives, hardships. Things happen, you lose jobs, you go through divorce, you have health issues. And if you're the owner that's managing it and you're communicating with your tenant, we're all humans. We want to help. But this is a business, right? We also need to pay our mortgage. We need to pay our bills and we need to make sure they hold to it. So a big focus on what my staff and I practice is our communication and how we talk to people. I did forensic interviewing for 14 years of my life where we're interviewing children in non-leading ways about things that happen to them, letting them tell their story on their own. And for me, the biggest correlation between that and property management is the ability to listen. Sometimes people just need to be heard about what's going on. They need to know that we're working with them and we're doing our best to help them. And with our ties to the community, we have lots of ways we can help. Maybe they lost their job and they're short for 2 months. We can connect them with Home to Stay or Mid-Michigan Community Action Agency or some of the churches in the community to help them get through that. And as long as you're not taking advantage of us and repeatedly, pulling the same problems out of your bag, then we'll do what we can to help both sides.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute because there are a lot of organizations locally that help tenants when they're having a hard time paying their rent for whatever reason. What has been your experience with some of those organizations and how would you advise a tenant listening that maybe is having a hard time hitting rent next month? Yeah. Where would you send them?
Well, it's all so situational based on what you're going through, right? If you're a victim of domestic violence going through a breakup, there's Shelter House, there's the Children's Advocacy Center, there's different resources there. If it's a loss of income, or if you're if you're a veteran or something like that, we can connect you with the VA. We can connect you with, there's so many different organizations based on the situation. So if that was the case, whether you're one of our tenants or just a member of the community, I'd say reach out to myself or one of our staff, and we are happy to walk you through, connect you, guide you. 211 is also a great resource if people are looking for help and guidance. We're sitting steadily at like a 3% vacancy rate in Midland. The rental market, there's very high demand, very low vacancy, not much available, especially in low-income housing or in the larger homes. So it's really, really challenging, and there's definitely a need for more services for these people.
Yeah, 211 is a great resource. You can just call the number 211 and you tell them what you're dealing with, and they try to connect you with the local resources. I'm familiar with that organization. But I think you're right. I think there is a wild lack of supply in rental housing in Midland right now. As you may know, there's some new apartment complexes being built. There's one on East Lawn right now that's going in the River Caddis development. Are you familiar with that?
No, not.
Yeah, I drive by it every day because I'm very interested in development. But it used to be East Lawn Elementary School. And so I think I don't know how many units are going up there. But if you drive by today, you'll see foundations going in, and they're going to be framing soon. And that's going to bring a little bit of relief. But housing, and the Habitat for Humanity just announced 14 houses are going to be developed on another old school lot coming up. So the city of Midland is doing what they can to increase the housing stock. But like you said, anybody looking for an affordable rental in Midland, it's tough.
Yeah.
And as that happens, as you know, rents go up.
Mm-hmm.
And as rents go up, it squeezes that income bracket even more, and that's tough.
Yeah.
But at the same time, taxes go up, insurance goes up, mortgage rates are higher than they used to be, and And there's always two sides to this coin when there's a landlord and a tenant and there's a house involved. It's not an easy balance. And I don't envy your position at all trying to mediate and handle and serve both sides of that equation.
Logan, let me ask, when you were in college back in the day, your first apartment, how much did you pay for it? Curious.
Oh boy, that was a long time ago.
I know. Can you remember?
No, I can't really remember. I'm trying to think. But my first apartment out of college was all the way through college. I had an apartment other than my freshman year when I was in the dorms. But I had two roommates, so I think it was maybe $1,200, and we split it, three ways or four ways.
Yeah, $300 or $400 a month.
Yeah,
was kind of what I remember paying. Yep. And I remember I had my sister-in-law was studying. She was an intern in Grand Rapids, and I remember her downtown rental was like $1,100, $1,200. I don't even remember the number, but I thought it was so expensive. Right? Yeah. Now, some of our most basic housing, a 500 square foot, one bedroom, one bath with utilities included is $925, $975, wow. And that's some of our just freshly renovated units down at the Circle Apartments. It's wild how much rents are right now, and it is heartbreaking for these people who can't afford it. Absolutely heartbreaking.
It is.
But until we have more housing, until we have more options, like you said, higher demand, lower inventory, prices go up. It's just the kind of the name of the game.
Well, let's talk about your business a little bit. What is the current structure of your organization now? Who do you have staffing, and what do they do?
So right now, I actually only have one full-time employee. If you don't consider myself, I work whenever I possibly can. Amanda, she works our front desk. She's kind of our tenant resources person, handles everything from maintenance calls to rent collection and things like that as they come up. So if you walk in our office, she's the person you're going to see at the front. We have two part-time front desk people who both were onboarded within the last 3 months, just to, again, put a face at that front desk and make sure that we have full staffing. Chelsea is our leasing agent and also handles our billing. She's a Modern Realty agent. She does great. And then there's myself.
What's been one of the biggest challenges that you face putting this business together over the last couple of years? I know there's been several, but what comes to mind?
Scaling too fast.
Growing too fast?
Yeah. So I was about a year in by the time we had shut down Modern Realties. We reopened, rebranded as 6024 Management. And from the day we opened 6024, we went from 75 doors to 220 doors in about 14 months.
Wow.
And we're like, yeah, we got this. We can handle it. But you can't do that kind of scaling perfectly. And that's my goal. I want to do things perfect. I don't want to mess anything up, right? So the majority of my time was spent bringing on specific software that built our automations, that built our systems, so that every time, my system says that somebody's moving, their lease ends in 90 days, at that 75-day mark, it's triggering me to send an email to the owners to say, here's the tenant's history, this is what they've been like, here's market rents for your property, this is what we recommend moving forward, either a renewal at the same price, renewal at 3%, not renewing, maybe if they're not a great tenant. So I spent the good part of 12 months building all of those automations out and then fixing them. Every time a little issue would come up, that's something we would have a death in a rental, and all of a sudden, our system doesn't handle that. Let's build that out. It took a good 2 years to finally get that going, and I think we're at the point now where we're making very few mistakes, and we have those checks and balances together to hold each other accountable.
What's the craziest thing that you've dealt with so far?
Oh, gosh. We just offboarded a big multi-unit property in town. The owner is going to manage it internally. They're scaling themselves, which is really, really exciting. That's a great goal. But I remember it was my last day at this property, and I was out handing out notices, the new contact information for the new property manager, and somebody approached me and said, just so you know, I think there's somebody living in the basement of one of the units. And I was like, this is like a, cement wall, just washer and dryer down there, just dirty basements, right? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I walk over and I walk down, and I kid you not, I'll see if I can get you a photo. It was more outfitted than this facility. I mean, they had beds, they had neon lights around the beds, posters, signs, sports teams, a rug. It was a fully functioning 2-bedroom apartment in the basement of this rental. I'm like, how did we not know? How on earth did we not know that somebody's living a full life in this basement? So that was pretty wild. Had to review maybe how often we're on site or in the basements of those properties. But yeah, that was wild. And then we always have just weird stories.
Well, you have things like domestic violence. You have neighbor complaints, and you have parties sometimes. You have things that break. You have, when the power goes out, when something's wrong with the toilet, or there's a drain backup. All those calls come directly to the property manager.
Yeah.
And again, as an owner, as somebody who owns a piece of real estate who's trying to rent it, it can be a wild disruption to your personal life when those calls are coming directly to you. So having a property manager handling those calls and creating work orders and coordinating with vendors and having vendors that they know, that's really helpful for sure. I remember I helped Doug Luce after the flood. He bought that apartment complex on the west side of town, Village West.
Yep.
And he did an extensive renovation. And I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that entire apartment complex, it wasn't an apartment at that time, it was condos, and it still is, but he bought it in full, and he went through an extensive renovation over the course of several years to bring that apartment complex or that community back. And he hired us to lease it for him and manage it for him. And that comes to mind because once he got it leased and stabilized, he took the property management back over and internally, which a lot of these bigger apartment complexes can do once they've utilized our capabilities of marketing and lease placement and stabilization. And that's totally understandable.
Yeah.
Because at scale, it can be, once you get to a certain number of units in an apartment, it can make sense to bring it in-house if you have that desire to do so.
Absolutely.
And I think you have rebalanced a lot of your portfolio as a property manager into more single-family, one or two off landlords, not necessarily big apartment complexes or multifamily properties as much. Is that right? Would you say that your ideal, what is your ideal client that owns real estate now look like?
Yeah, we're really honing in on that. We're fortunate to be at the place where we can kind of pick and choose what we do manage because we value the quality of life of our tenants just as much as we value our relationships with our owners. And some people don't want to hear that, but at the same time, I care about my community and the people that live in it. And I'm not going to be that landlord that they're saying my heat's not working, and I'm like, sorry, we don't have the money to fix it. So our focus really is working with people who want to help people, who aren't just doing this for the money, but they're doing this because they love real estate. They love investing. They love helping others, providing homes. So that's been our priority moving forward. We are also getting more into development now, which is exciting. New builds, new apartment complexes, again, trying to increase inventory of housing in Midland. So that's been something we've been dabbling with a little bit and really enjoying.
Yeah, not to get it too into those special details yet, but you are connected with some new development that's coming into Midland and new housing stock, and I am as well, which is nice. And we work together on those things, which is great because the community needs that. But I think you make a really good point. It is a difficult balance to serve tenant needs, which are legitimate, and to serve landlord financial needs, which are also legitimate because they're not in line. They're not in sync. It's not a symbiotic relationship where everybody benefits. You have to help tenants get the services they need and help the landlords understand what they need to invest in, but also make sure that no advantage is being taken as well, and also keep the best interest of the landlord in mind as well, because it is a financial transaction for their family.
Yeah.
That's hard. I don't envy that. In fact, that's why I don't do it.
Yeah.
And
smart man.
Well, as a landlord too, as a property owner, you guys are constantly coming to me saying, hey, you need to do this, or do you want to do this? And how do you want to handle this? And there's a lot of decisions to be made, and it's tough. And you never, how do you make that decision as an owner, as a landlord? We hear a lot of talk on the forums and things. The tenant perspective is very clear, and oftentimes it's very legitimate too, which is they're not being served by the owner. And of course, the property manager gets the blame.
Yeah.
You can't control what the owner does in terms of decisions they make, what repairs to handle, what repairs to defer, what services to provide, what amenities to add or offer. And so it's a difficult position to be in when you're trying to mitigate or trying to manage both sides of that conversation. Would you agree?
I would. You said the right word, though, the mitigate, right? Because yes, it's hard to be the messenger on the bad news, but our job as a property manager is to find a solution that satisfies both, right?
Mediate.
Right, we're going to mediate.
Yeah.
Thank you, not mitigate. Mediate. Right, our job And we just went through this. A tenant wanted, I can't remember, I think it was a garbage disposal. And, we went to the owner and said, the tenant wants a garbage disposal. Are you willing to do it? And the conversation came back to say, let's look at ways that we can solve this problem for both, where we're not just asking the owner for money. If the tenant wants a garbage disposal, are they willing to pay for it themselves? It's a benefit to both. They get the garbage disposal in their home. The owner has the long-term added value of having that in their property. Mm-hmm. So our job isn't just to relay a message or to say yes or no. It's to find solutions that benefit both sides.
And that's what makes a great property manager. And to be honest, in my experience over 15 years of real estate, property managers that are really good are very, very rare across the country. I've dealt with property managers locally and in other states as both a landlord and a tenant, and I've been disappointed constantly. And I really mean it when I say that you and your organization have outperformed, in my opinion, any property management organization that I've ever seen. And that's what our goal was when we started, when you took this direction and decided to make this your full-time focus. And you've done a great job.
I appreciate that.
Anybody listening that has a house, they're either going to move out of it or they already own it. It's a rental, or it could be a rental, or they're handling it themselves, or they're a possible client for 6024. Mm-hmm. How would you advise them to analyze whether you or another property management company is the right solution for them?
That's such a good question. And I'm going to take it back, not necessarily only to those people who own a property already, but who are thinking about getting into investing in real estate. I think there's a couple of things that you really need to know well, right? First of all, you need to know your financial situation well. You need to know what you can afford, what you can't, where you could maybe leverage funds or money that you have. Maybe you have equity in your current home that you could tap into to get moving. Maybe you can use a hard money lender like, Finley Capital or something like that to find the funds to get into investing. You really have to know your financial situation. Real estate investing is not a short-term moneymaker. This is a long game, right? This is end game. I'm buying properties, I'm putting them in LLCs for my kids to have down the road. If I cash flow $100 or $200 per property per month, fantastic, right? But you're not going to make a lot of money short-term on real estate investing. That being said, real estate investments, I think it's like a $320 trillion market. It's the biggest asset group there is. So there's so much opportunity if done well. So know your finances well. Know your market well. Use a local agent. Please use a local agent because they know better than anybody what that market's like. Market in Grand Rapids is very different than the market here, right? So I have this great new investor I'm working with. They're asking all the right questions about how does this differ from there. This is what we're doing in other parts of the state. What would that look like in Midland? So work with local agents, know your market really, really well before you get into it.
I think you made a great point, and that is buying a rental property is, in my opinion, of course, we're biased as real estate people, but I think it's a wonderful asset class to invest in the long term. When I grew up, when I was listening to Carlton Sheets and getting attracted to real estate and enamored by it, Bigger Pockets and all these podcasts and shows, I used to think about all this cash flow and this positive cash that you'd earn when you buy a rental property. And over the course of a decade of owning rental properties, I've understood that the cash flow is not the primary benefit of owning real estate. And oftentimes, if you really think about it, as property taxes increase, which they continue to do, as homeowners insurance increases, as it continues to do, even with rent increases, a lot of times the rent increases don't outpace those additional expenses. That in and of itself puts downward pressure on the cash flow of a rental property. But you also have interest rates from the bank, so financing terms. So not getting too deep in the weeds here, but the viability of a rental property has all these different factors: rental income, vacancy, the taxes, insurance, cost of capital, all that other stuff.
Maintenance.
And that's what I was going. You got vacancy and you have maintenance,
Yeah.
okay? And of course you have property management costs too, that when you hire a service, that it digs into it a little bit. But when you have a vacancy and you have to clean the carpets or replace the carpets and paint the walls and do all the things that you have to do every time there's a turnover or every time something breaks, if a furnace breaks or if a dishwasher breaks, the owner is responsible for those repairs. And that digs into the cash flow. It eats into the cash flow tremendously in many cases. But 15 years from now, if you bought a rental property for your kiddo today and you put it in Kiddo 1 LLC and Kiddo 2 LLC, 15 to 20 years from now, depending on how you finance it, if you can hang on for that period of time, you're going to own that property with no debt.
Yeah.
And that property can pay for your kiddo's college or their wedding or their first, starting out or your retirement or whatever. So anybody listening, I always am a huge advocate of buying rental properties if you can afford to do it. If you can save up the money to put the down payment down on a rental, which is not easy. Usually you need 20% of the purchase to buy that property. But if you can squirrel that away and apply that, that investment into a rental property, hand it over to somebody like Bethany and say, hey, I'll call you in 15 years. I don't want to think about this again. Help me through this. The upside, the benefit at the end of the day, in my mind, is worth it. Especially if you have somebody managing the property for you.
Yeah, 100%. And you're diversifying your funds. You're putting it in a safe and stable place. The home will appreciate. I bought, my first house I ever bought ended up kind of being a rental situation. But the first one I bought here, I bought for $95,000. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, kind of between downtown and the Center for the Arts in that area. Bought it for, I think, $95,000, put $20,000 into it. Just recently decided I was going to sell it for another project that I'm doing, and it's on market at $150,000. So, we're talking 2 years difference because it's appreciated. I put a little bit of work into it. So, yes, you can buy and you can hold, which is a great way to do it. Buy, hold, rent. There's other strategies that you can utilize, right? Mm-hmm. There's the BRRRR strategy. Mm-hmm. Buy, you renovate, you refinance at that added value, take that extra equity or money that you have in your property and you buy your next one. I've got some investors I'm working with right now that are doing just that. It's so fun to help them buy their first property and then watch them as they take the money from that and the rent history and roll it into the next one. There's house hacking where you buy one, you live in half, you rent out the other. All kinds of different strategies based on that person's situation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to how much risk you're willing to take on, how much you can afford to take on, what your skills and knowledge are. Because if you're a contractor that knows how to do the work and can cut the costs of that, or if you have a really good partner that you trust, there's a lot less risk, a lot less cost to it. The flaw I see happening the most is people buying investment properties without an inspection. And I see it over and over again, especially with large multi-unit buildings. They come in, they have an expectation of what they're going to pay on it, and then the maintenance ends up being a lot more than they expect. So I always highly, highly suggest, again, local agent, inspection on the property, make sure you know your numbers very well.
Yeah, all good advice. And of course, real estate has risk and returns and appreciation are not guaranteed. There's risks just like any other asset class. But at the end of the day, if you put a 15 or a 20-year mortgage on a property and you hold on to it and you pay it off, or your tenant helps you pay it off for 15 to 20 years, even if it doesn't appreciate $1, you've built some wealth in your balance sheet. But yeah, I think home inspections are critical. Analyzing, do your due diligence. And you mentioned the BRRRR strategy: buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. I got you. That's a great strategy. And that's how I built my portfolio in the early days, was finding undervalued assets that were deferred. They had deferred maintenance. In other words, they weren't well kept and they were pulling the communities down, the neighborhoods down. And I would buy those properties, often with private loans from investors at the time, and renovate those properties to bring their value up, which is nice because you can force appreciation in a property by adding value to it through paint, carpet, flooring, bathrooms, usually construction improvements. And the neighborhoods typically like that when you do that, because it helps their property values increase. Because if your house next door is vacant and dilapidated, the value of your property is less than it would be had that property been improved. So there's a lot of upside to renovations and the BRRRR strategy. But from an investment standpoint, your clients can add a lot of value, and they can force that appreciation and leverage it into growth, which is nice. And you can help them with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here.
Okay, so if anybody is interested in learning about the BRRRR strategy, or hiring you as a property manager, or just learning more about the process in Midland, where would you send them?
I'd send them to my website or my phone, 6024pm.com. I know it's a weird name. It's named after where we got our start, Modern Realty. That was 6024 Eastman Avenue. So we gave the company the name after where we got our start. So 6024pm.com is our website. You can find information whether you're a tenant looking for rentals, if you're an owner investor. Contact information is there. Reach out to me, reach out to any member of our team. We are happy to help, even if it's just guidance along the way.
Bethany, thanks for being on the Talk Midland podcast.
Thank you for having me.